going through it chapter by chapter and verse by verse. There are 50 chapters in the book of Genesis, so if everything goes right, we will actually finish that book this year. That's an amazing thing. I was reading about John Calvin in Geneva, who started the book of Mark, and it took him 12 years to finish. I'm not going into that depth, okay? So you don't have to worry about it taking 12 years, but we're almost there. We've gotten up to Genesis chapter 40. Where are we? Well, Joseph has been sold into slavery because his brothers were jealous because they envied him. He had all these dreams that were basically saying he's great, and they weren't. Of course, they weren't, and he was, but that didn't matter. They were just jealous. They weren't willing to change anything about themselves. And at first, they planned to kill him, but then they decided to make some money off of him, so they sold him as a slave. And he's been purchased by a man named Potiphar, who's the captain of the secret police, the bodyguard of the world's most powerful man at that time. All because he had a couple of dreams. It doesn't seem to get any more unfair than that. But God has been with him. He believes with all of his heart that if God has allowed me to be sold as a slave, that must be God's will. And if it's God's will, then I'm going to serve God by serving Potiphar. That was his attitude. And that is completely unlike the attitude that most of us have when things are unfair in life. How many of you have figured out, you've been living long enough, that life is just unfair and hard? It's unfair and hard. And you get mad about it. It's easy to get bitter about that. It's easy to go, why is it that I'm supposedly a child of God and all of these bad things are happening? It's easy to ask that question and forget something. You live in a cursed world. It's been cursed by God himself. From the beginning, he said to Adam, and you and all of your descendants, you're going to get out there and work hard, and all you're going to get is thorns and thistles. By the sweat of your brow, because of sin. And not only do you live in a cursed world, but you live among a group of people in this culture that ignore and reject God. So why in the world would you think it's ever going to be fair? It's not going to be. You see, Joseph understood that concept. He owned that. Instead of saying, why me, in terms of being sold as a slave, he said, why not me? And I'm going to go and I'm going to serve God because I've got my eyes on something else. I've got my eyes on the prize that comes later when the Lord is going to take me out of this life and give me the reward for what I do in it. Joseph had his eyes on the prize. And because he did, he served well. And lo and behold, God blessed him within that circumstance, so that he rose to become the manager of all of Potiphar's estate. But then right when everything seems to be going well, Potiphar's wife tries to seduce him. And when he goes, I'm not going for that. I serve God. I'm not going to do what's evil. She lies about him and he ends up in jail. And again, we see that life is hard. It's unfair. Good people, bad things can happen to them, to you, just like Joseph. But again, here's Joseph. He could have said in his heart, I've been a slave for years. I have toiled and worked hard and done all the right stuff. I've been treated like dirt unfairly, and I finally achieved something, and this happens? He could have been there. He could have said that. Could have been angry and sullen and bitter, but he didn't. He could have said to himself, why even bother to try? Every time I try to do something, I get hammered again. He could have said to himself, why bother trying to serve other prisoners and serve the warden? This is all about me now. I'm in jail. I've got to get what's in the best I can out of this for myself. But he did not. Because again, he said in his heart, if God has allowed this, then I will serve God by serving everybody around me. That was his attitude. The Bible tells us that Joseph is one of the greatest men of God that has ever taken a breath. You need to pay attention. God likes Joe. And if you want God to be on your side, if you want to have favor the way Joseph did, you need to do things the way Joseph did. Are you with me? That's what we're trying to learn here. That's what I'm trying to learn here. Because I've been angry. I've been sullen. I've been bitter. Because life hasn't given me what I thought it should or what I deserved. I've been treated unfairly. I've been lied about. I've been betrayed. I've been left. I've been abandoned. I know the feeling. And it's very, very hard to believe that God has a destiny for me, for you, that he has a plan, when it just seems like everything is coming at you like a tidal wave. You see, Joseph did not know the plan. He didn't know the reasons he was suffering. He simply decided, if you've put me here, then I will be the best prisoner here. I'm going to serve you by serving the warden. And he did. And because of that, over time, because he refused to give in to the victim mentality, if you're human, you're already a victim. Everybody is. And you're no more a victim than anybody else. But we tend to think that everything comes down on me. Nobody has it as bad as me. Oh, sure they do. Everybody does. But instead of owning that victim mentality and walking around with a little black cloud hanging over his head, he decided, I'm going to serve God by serving other people. And because of that attitude, God blessed him so much that even in the prison, he becomes second only to the warden. He starts to run the prison. I imagine he had a really rather nice cell after a while. Things were going well, even in a prison. Now, Joseph did not know it then, but these experiences are making him capable of being able to run an empire. See, God knew that Joe had a good heart. He knew he was the right man for the job that God had in mind for him. But God also knew this young man's got to go through a few things. He's got to get toughened up. He's got to learn how to speak Egyptian, and he's got to learn how to speak it the way the prisoners speak it down in the dungeons. He's got to learn the slang. He's got to know what's going on in this culture. He's got to be tough enough to be able to manage people who don't want to be managed, because what's going to happen when a famine hits this country and I put him in charge, he's going to have to deal with people that want to riot to get food. He's going to save tens of thousands of lives. He doesn't know it yet, but I got to put him through this to get him ready for that. You see, God may be allowing you to go through some hard times. But if you make up your mind not to take the victim mentality, but to make up your mind that I'm going to serve God by serving others no matter where I am, no matter what my circumstance is, then God can begin to do something in and through your life, because God can work through anyone who is willing to let him work through their life. That would include you. Anyone. But there's so many of us that are so busy complaining. We are so busy. We've got in the habit of cultivating that attitude of, no matter how hard I try, it just goes from bad to worse. I'm always the one that gets hammered. Listen to me again. That negative attitude, if you've owned that, if that's your habit of life, I want to hit you and I want to challenge you with something. I want you to examine that attitude. Listen carefully to me. Everybody's a victim. You live in a cursed world. Everybody is. And when you look out from yourself and say, well, he's got it better than me, and she's got it better than me, and she's got... What you're really doing is you're envying, and you're jealous, and you're owning that. Not only that, and this, if it shakes you and it bothers you and you want to leave this auditorium because I hit you right where it hurts, get over yourself. It's unbelief. It's unbelief. And God hates it. He hates that attitude. Let me tell you what I'm talking about. Why is it unbelief? Because when you have this attitude of, my life stinks, you know what? Maybe it does, but it's the life that God has allowed for you. And when you're constantly walking around going, my life stinks, what you're really saying is that I don't believe that God is smart enough, that God is good enough, that God cares about me enough to change things. So all I'm going to do is walk around and be bitter all the time and angry because this happened to me and that happened to me. Instead of going, you know what, God? You could have prevented it, but you didn't. And the problem is that if you really think this through, if you're angry and bitter, you're really angry and bitter at God for not having fixed your problem, not having prevented where you are in life. That is unbelief. And I'm here to tell you that God will not work through someone with that attitude. If you want God to work through your life, if you want to quit short-circuiting him, God will not violate your free will. He's created you special. He does have a plan, but he's not going to work it in your life. Not until you're willing to say, you know what, I trust you. I'm going to quit walking around feeling sorry for myself 24/7. Joseph did not do this. Was he bitter about being in the prison? Yeah, sure. It was not very much fun there. That's why he says later, hey, remember me, get me out of this place. There's no problem with that. There's no problem with working to improve your situation. There's no problem with praying and saying, God, I'm looking forward to changes. But you've got to divorce yourself from that attitude, which is constantly, I'm a victim. I'm a victim. Well, at least you have a spouse. Well, at least you have a house. Well, at least you have a job. What you're really doing is going, yeah, God doesn't care about me, but he cares about you. That's unbelief. That's harsh. People don't want to hear that. It's just the truth. So let's take a look at what happens when you get the right attitude. It came to pass after these things that the butler and the baker of the king of Egypt offended their lord, the king of Egypt. And Pharaoh was angry with his two officers, the chief butler and the chief baker. So he put them in custody in the house of the captain of the guard in the prison, the place where Joseph was confined. And the captain of the guard charged Joseph with them, and he served them. He served them. So they were in custody for a while. For a while, we don't know how long, but I find it very interesting that the word butler here is shachah in Hebrew, and it means to give to drink. And what it really means is this is the person that was in charge not just of the quality of what the king was drinking, but what he was doing is he had to test the wine to make sure it wasn't poison. So I get to drink it first, and if I die, then Pharaoh doesn't have to worry about it. I mean, what a job. Not only do you get to test the wine, but you have to make sure that it's of the highest quality, and not just the wine, but everything the king drinks. Water, beer, wine, everything. You have to check it all. Now, I find it very interesting. I think that there's actually a clue here about something that's going on. The baker and the cupbearer, the wine steward. Both of these people in charge of what the king eats and drinks. In other words, something happened, didn't it? There's a rumor, there's a plot to poison and kill the king. It's been discovered, but they don't know for sure who's really guilty. So the smart thing to do is to take those guys that are in charge and put them in prison while we investigate the situation. And look who's in charge of investigating the situation. It says he put them in the custody in the house of the captain of the guard. Who's that? Potiphar. Now think about that for a second. Potiphar's the captain of the guard. Joseph's been put in prison. There's a warden in the prison, but the warden answers to who? The captain of the guard. So the captain of the guard goes past the warden, goes directly to Joe because he knows Joseph. Why? Because he doesn't trust his wife. And he went to Joe and he said, Joe, look, I've got a major problem here. I don't know which of these two guys is guilty. I got to make sure that they don't commit suicide while they're in prison. I got to make sure that some of the other guys around here who are mad at them because they're in high levels, that they don't get assassinated while we're here. Because, Joe, my head's on the line too. I got to figure this one out. So I'm putting you in charge of these two idiots to make sure that they are safe and cared for. Can you imagine the amount of trust that Potiphar is now putting in a guy that he just threw out of his own house? Maybe you missed that part. See, Joe is being given a very, very, very high responsibility during this investigation. And look what he does. I mean, think about this situation for a minute. Don't you think that if you're Joseph, you have an opportunity here to get out of jail? You see what I'm saying? But he doesn't take it. Verse 4 says, he went and served them. He went and served them and their needs. And that's incredibly important. Why serve other people? Why not serve yourself? Why not serve yourself? Because again, he had this attitude that he believed that God was good all of the time, that God had his back, that God was in charge, and he lived believing this, that God would take care of his destiny. And that is a vital principle. When you focus your attention, listen to me on this, when you're focusing your attention all the time on what is wrong with your life, with your constantly looking at the negative, it's just unbelief. It's just distrust that God is really doing something in your life or willing to do anything good through you. But Joseph doesn't have this attitude. I have fallen victim to this attitude more than once. The depression that I have suffered through in my life, when I analyze it, comes back to me constantly thinking, oh, woe is me, woe is me. And you know what? It's easy to find evidence that you've been hosed in your life. Piece of cake. Everybody start right now. Get out your evidence. And you can start writing a book about all the things that everybody's done to you. How many of you know your list? Throw it away. Get rid of your list. But you see, we all want to focus naturally. You see, the Bible tells us that this kind of a negative attitude where we're constantly focusing on what is negative, it's going to take a toll on you. It's going to take a physical and a spiritual toll on you. Now, over time, you have heard me reject the name it, claim it teachings in very fierce terms. And I still reject them. You have heard me say that the whole power of the positive mental attitude, the whole push over there, that's a bunch of nonsense. You've heard me say that too, and I stand by it. However, all good lies have an element of truth to them. All good lies have an element of truth to them. There is a truth here that we need to get. Take a look at Proverbs. It says, a sound heart is life to the body, but envy is rottenness to the bones. See, envy is this attitude that everyone else has it better than I do. And when you cultivate that attitude, everyone else has it better. My brother's got it better. My sister's got it better. My friends in high school got it better. Everybody, that is envy and it's unbelief. And it will literally cause you to have physical symptoms of sickness over time. That's what this is saying. It's rottenness to your bones. There may be a reason you're always tired. There may be a reason you're always getting sick, because this is a self-fulfilling prophecy. It's self-fulfilling. When you're constantly looking out and saying, well, Jennifer's a single parent, but when I was a single parent, I didn't have it. You have it much better than me. It's just envy. It's unbelief. It's bitterness of soul. It's me looking back and going, God could have done better. He did it for her. Why didn't he do it for me? It's unbelief. It creates bitterness and stress, which is going to affect me physically over time. And it's self-fulfilling because anything good that happens to that single parent, I'll go, well, it didn't happen to me, see? I was right. That's the self-fulfilling nature of it. And that's the attitude we need to avoid with all of our hearts. Now let's take a look at what happens here. In Genesis 40, verse 5, it says, the butler and the baker of the king of Egypt, who were confined in the prison, had a dream. Both of them. Each man's dream in one night, and each man's dream with its own interpretation. And Joseph came into them in the morning and looked at them and saw that they were sad. Now, when you're in prison, that's probably not an uncommon sight. So he asked Pharaoh's officers who were with him in the custody of his Lord's house, saying, why do you look so sad today? Now, what kind of a question is that? I mean, when you're in jail and the guy who's in charge of the jail comes and says, what are you so sad about? Which tells you a lot about Joseph's attitude. He's probably going, hey, how's it going? Hey, how you doing? You're going to be in here for a long time, aren't you? But I got some good food for you. Hey, what are you so sad for? What's your problem? God's got everything under control. You see what I'm saying? Do you see his attitude? What are you so sad for today? And they said to him, well, we each had a dream and there's no interpreter of it. And you can just imagine Joe going, oh, let me tell you about dreams. Dude, last time I was talking about dreams and the last time I was doing an interpretation thing, it caused me some problems. I don't want to hear nothing about dreams. But he doesn't say that. He says, well, don't interpretations belong to God? Tell them to me, please. So it's almost a silly question. You're in jail. You're going to be sad. But something's going on. And you got to ask yourself the question, why does Joseph care? Why does he care at all? Angry, bitter people are not interested in other people. They don't care. But Joseph is none of those things. He is not the angry, bitter person. But there are so many of us that we so focus on how negative everything is and how we've been hosed by this and hosed by that and how everything is unfair. Even the constant martyr is like this. How many of you have ever met the constant martyr? The constant martyr is somebody who is always willing, they appear to be willing to sacrifice to do that task or to do that service. But they're really not, are they? It's all, yeah, well, nobody else will do it, so I will. It's always falling back to me anyway. Don't worry, I got it. Are they really saying, don't worry, I got it? No, they're really saying, stroke my ego really big right here, right now. That's what I want. What is it? The constant martyr isn't really interested in serving other people. The constant martyr is serving themselves. Give me attention. Look at what a slave I am. Watch me do the dishes again, because nobody else will. Even the constant martyr, they're really not serving others. But a person who wants to serve Jesus Christ and wants to really follow him will be others-centered, not self-centered. That's the attitude that we need to cultivate. Let me give you an example of what I'm talking about. There was an interesting study done. This house right here is Corrie ten Boom's house. I've been there. It's right on the corner of that alley you see there. And Corrie and her family hid Jewish people in this house during World War II. They ended up being arrested themselves for this crime of having saved these lives, sent to the concentration camps where her father, her sister, her brother, and her cousin were all murdered. She alone survived because of a typographical error. She was released. By an error on a typewriter, she was released. When everybody else in her unit was gassed within the week, she was released because God was looking after her. But that's a whole other story. But when you look at this, they did a study in the 50s and 60s. They tried to find out what was the difference between people like Corrie and her family and all of their neighbors. Why did these people go out and become heroes? What was different about them? And when they studied them, they found out that people like the Ten Booms were not extraordinary people. They were normal folks. There was nothing they could see in their study that was different. There was nothing about their education, even their religion. Because a whole lot of people in Holland at that time who went to the same church that the Ten Booms went to didn't hide Jews. In fact, they turned them in. It was somebody from her circle of friends that betrayed her. It resulted in the death of all those people. So what was it about them? They discovered there was only one thing about these rescuers that was different in this study. They found out that these people were always helping other people. Always. They'd been doing it long before the war. They had a mindset and a lifestyle of being others-centered instead of self-centered. That was the only difference. It was that attitude of, we've always done it this way. So of course we're going to sacrifice our entire lives and families and fortune and everything else in order to save people. It's what we always do. It's who we are. You become a hero and you save thousands of people during a war, not because you went to school or because you went to Sunday school or church, but because you have an attitude that says, I serve God by serving others, and I've always been this way. And don't think it can't happen right here, because it can. Listen, your natural self, your flesh, will always complain. Your natural self will always whine. Your natural self will always focus on what is negative. That will be the habit of your life. Your self, your flesh, will always believe that everyone else has it better and that nobody understands you. Nobody has it as bad as you. But the truth is, everyone feels that way. We don't want to admit that because we want to exalt our own little thrones above God's. We don't want to admit the fact that everybody has troubles. Everybody's been ripped off. Everybody's been lied to, lied about. Everybody has. And everybody has troubles. This is why someone like Robin Williams, who can be rich and famous, have friends all over the world, have everything, will go out and kill themselves. Everything that we who are not rich and famous might look to and might desire. Well, if I only won the lottery, if I only had this, if I only had that. No, everyone has hard times. Everyone does. You can reject that thinking the same way that Joseph did. You can make up your mind that you're going to decide to follow Jesus and do what Jesus did, no matter what your circumstance, no matter where you find yourself. See, when he made up his mind, I'm going to serve God by serving others, even in a prison, God said, that's the right attitude, kid. That's the attitude I'm going to bless. That's somebody I know I can work through because you're not interested in your own glory. You're interested in mine. And because of that, I can do something with you. If you want God to work in your life, you're going to have to change your attitude, your mindset. Take a look at what happens. Then the chief butler told his dream to Joe, and he said, behold, in my dream there was a vine before me, and in the vine were 3 branches, and it was as though it budded, and its blossoms shot forth, and its clusters brought forth ripe grapes. Then Pharaoh's cup was in my hand. I took the grapes and pressed them into Pharaoh's cup and placed the cup in Pharaoh's hand. And Joseph said to him, well, this is the interpretation of it. The 3 branches, well, those are 3 days. Now, within 3 days, Pharaoh will lift up your head and restore you to your place. and you will put Pharaoh's cup in his hand according to the former manner when you were his butler. But remember me when it is well with you, and please show kindness to me. Make mention to me to Pharaoh, and get me out of this house. For indeed I was stolen away from the land of the Hebrews, and also I have done nothing here that they should put me in the dungeon. Now, there's nothing wrong with seeking a way out of a tough situation, but notice he doesn't blame his brothers, does he? And he doesn't blame Potiphar's wife, does he? That's not the issue. It's important that you see that. Now, when the chief baker saw that the interpretation was good, well, he said to Joe, I also was in my dream, and there were 3 white baskets on my head. And in the uppermost basket were all kinds of baked goods for Pharaoh, and the birds ate them out of the basket on my head. So Joseph answered and said, this is the interpretation of it. You're going to love this. Hang in there, pal. 3 baskets are 3 days, and within 3 days, Pharaoh's going to lift your head from you, right off your shoulders, and hang you on a tree, and the birds will eat your flesh. Have a nice day. Pretty rough, isn't it? You see, sometimes, listen carefully on this. Sometimes serving other people, being others focused, is easy, even pleasant. You know what I mean? Even rewarding. Hey, your dream means that you're going to be restored to your position. You're going to have a great day. And when that happens, don't forget your pal Joe. Isn't it fun serving others? But then, sometimes meeting the real needs of other people means telling them the truth when it's tough. It means confronting sin when they might get offended and angry. It means telling people sometimes what they don't want to hear. You see, the baker didn't want to hear a bad report, but Joe tells it anyway. Now let's think about the situation that Joseph's in. If Joseph decides, you know what, I know what the interpretation of this dream is, but I don't want to tell him. Because if I tell him, he's going to be upset. I don't want to offend him. I don't want to hurt his feelings. So maybe I'll just say something else. But if you say something else, in 3 days you're going to find out that you're a liar. Does that make sense? Because he knows the interpretation and he knows what's going to happen. But if he says nothing, what's going to happen to the poor baker? Is the baker going to have any opportunity to make things right? None at all. Now, let's think about this for a second. These 2 boys are in jail for a reason. They've been accused of a crime. There's an investigation going on, and these dreams are saying the investigation is going to come to a conclusion. You see, the butler jumps forward and says, let me tell you my dream. Why? Because in his heart he knows he's innocent. And he's hoping that this is going to all work out because I know I didn't do anything wrong. But the baker keeps his mouth shut. Why? Because he's as guilty as sin. He was in on this plot, and he knows it. So when he sees the interpretation was good, he's kind of hopeful that, hey, maybe I'm going to get out of this. But when Joe says, here's what's going down, and you're going to die, he knows that his guilt is going to be found out, and he's going to suffer the consequences. Now, why is this so important to go through? If Joe had refused to tell him or had told him a lie, there would have been no chance for this guy to make things right with the true God. Because in 3 days' time, it's going to become very clear that Joseph's God is the one and only true God, because only God can tell the future. Are you with me? And the baker's going to know it. And in that 3-day time period when he knows he's guilty and he knows in his heart this is going to go down, we don't know what happened in those 3 days, do we? But I'm willing to bet that baker crawled into Joe's office and said, I really am guilty and this is going to go down. Because remember, they believed in dreams. They knew. Does that make sense? It's not like today. You have a dream like this and it's keeping you up all night. You know it's spiritual in nature. You know it's going to happen. Does that make sense? So he had an opportunity to go into Joe and say, how can I make it right with this God? Because I'm going to meet him. And I got 3 days to figure it out. Now, this is important. This is important. Because today, we're under a tremendous amount of pressure to be silent about our religious beliefs, aren't we? We're under a tremendous amount of cultural pressure to keep our views about what is right and what is wrong to ourselves. Keep it within your little church. Don't try to bring your morality out and impose it on our society. Don't try to come out into our society and be so offensive as to say that this immoral behavior is going to lead to death, eternal death. You offend people when you do that. There's a lot of pressure. But listen, the Bible is clear. Everyone has offended God. Everyone. The Bible is clear that everyone needs forgiveness. And without forgiveness, through the blood of Jesus Christ, people are going to hell. Nice people. People in your neighborhood. People that wave at you when you're mowing your lawn are going to go to hell. They are going to suffer eternal anguish because they are separated from the living God. That is the truth. And people don't want to hear that because it makes them uncomfortable. People don't want to hear about hell because it's not pleasant. Just like the interpretation of this dream is not pleasant. It didn't help Joseph's situation in that moment to tell the baker the truth. But Joe is committed to serving the real needs of people. And the baker really needed to know, you're guilty, you're going down, and you need to get things right because you're going to die in 3 days. Whether he wanted to hear it or not, whether it was pleasant for Joseph to tell it or not, is irrelevant. You see, if you really love others, you'll find a way to warn them that they're going to hell. You have friends that are going to hell. Did you know that? You have coworkers. They're going to hell. People you meet in the street, at the grocery store, when you pay your taxes. The tax guy is calculating it up. He may be going to hell. You have the answer to keep them from going there. Why are you sitting on it? Why are you doing nothing with it? And you may be looking at me and go, well, I'm no evangelist. I don't have those gifts. It terrifies me to even think about talking to someone about going to hell and things like that. I can't even comprehend that. I can't do that. I don't have those skills. Okay, that's all right. I'm not asking you to go door to door. I'm not asking you to preach on a street corner, and neither is God, unless that's your gift. But you can invite people to church, and I'll be happy to tell them. Because every time I give a message, I give the salvation story at the end, don't I? Even if it's to a whole bunch of people I know are already saved. Why? So that you can know for sure that every week I'm going to do that. So if you bring your friend next week, they're going to hear the gospel. Somebody say amen. Okay, so it's okay to be afraid, but you can offer them lunch. You can bribe them right into hearing the truth. It's not that difficult. But you've got to be willing to bring them here. You've got to be willing to say it. Listen, it reminds me of a story in England. A condemned criminal was on his way to the gallows. He was headed there. And there was a pastor, priest, he was priest, Church of England, right beside him. You know, monotone, Bible says this, Bible says that. Priest didn't even care. It's just his job. Got another one going up to get hung. And the condemned criminal stopped and turned and looked at him. He said, do you really believe that? And it shook the priest because normally these guys don't talk to him. Well, yeah. Do you really believe that Jesus can forgive sins? Because if I believed that and I was out of here, I would crawl on my hands and knees over broken glass to tell everyone Do you really believe that? And then he turned and marched up to the gallows. I don't know if it's a true story or not, but I think it is. Look what happened. And it came to pass on the third day, which was Pharaoh's birthday, that he made a feast for all of his servants, and he lifted up the head of the chief butler and the chief baker among his servants, brought them in, is what that means. Then he restored the chief butler to his butlership again, and he placed the cup in Pharaoh's hand. But he hanged the chief baker as Joseph had interpreted to them. Yet the chief butler did not remember Joseph, but forgot him. Forgot him for 2 solid years, we're going to find out in the next chapter. That's a long time to forget the guy that told you you're going to get out of jail. You have this major spiritual experience. You would think that the guy would have a little gratitude, but he forgets. And at first you may say to yourself, that just seems so unfair. It just seems wrong. Here's Joseph getting hosed again. The truth of the matter is, the timing wasn't right. Because if the chief butler had said to the king right there on the spot, hey, let me tell you this story, and had gotten Joseph out of jail, where would he have gone? He would have gone home. He would have gone back to Canaan. He would not be in the position that he needed to be in order to become Pharaoh's right-hand man. Does that make sense? He had to be there at exactly the right time. And we miss something when we see that Joseph was forgotten by the butler. Joe didn't forget, did he? He knew that his dream's interpretation had come to pass. So what does that mean? That means my other dreams that I had will also come to pass. And I remember all of my whole family bowing down to me. God has a plan. See, God didn't leave Joseph even in those 2 years. He went, well, all right, boss, I guess I got to wait. But I can see from this that you're with me. That's important. Because God's timing, listen to this, God's timing does not always line up with your comfort. But his timing is always the right timing. See, if Joseph had been released right then, he would have died in the famine, like his brothers and everybody else in the area. Egypt would have perished. But as it is, God said, you got 2 more years. Because God's timing doesn't always line up with your comfort. So, what can we learn from this? Well, 3 things, I think. First of all, bitterness and focusing on the negative in your life is just unbelief, and God is not interested in blessing that mindset. So my question for you this morning is, will you reject that mindset? Will you repent of it if you have owned it? Because some of you have. Some of you have been walking around with this constant negative. I'm always finding what's wrong. I'm always seeing how I'm getting hosed again. If that is your attitude, you need to repent this morning. It's unbelief. That's what you should have learned. And my question is, when we get to our prayer time, will you do that? The second thing I think I see here is that if we work to have this, we need to work to have a mindset of serving God by serving others to the best of your ability, no matter what is happening in your life, because that's the mindset that God's going to bless. Does that make sense? Well, that's what we learned here. And my question for you is, will you work to have that mindset from here on out? What will you do? Will you renew your mind through him and say, you know what, God? I need to start serving you by serving those around me. I need to be the best employee where I work. I need to be the best parent. I need to be a servant in this church wherever and whenever I can. Instead of constantly going, well, when things get better, then I'll serve. When I heal up, then I'll serve. Remember Ernest? He didn't wait for healing. Don't ever forget. He gave us an example. Out there pushing his little thing and going, how can I help? All the way to the end. You serve God by serving others, no matter what's happening in your life. Now, here's the big one, and this is what I'm going to ask my ushers to come and help me with this. God wants you to tell the truth about him. Because the most loving thing that you can do is to warn people about the consequences of not turning your life over to God. That's the most loving thing that you can do. Where's my ushers? I need my ushers. They got something for me. Listen, I got a challenge for you. They're going to pass out these slips of paper. And I said to you before, you don't have to be an evangelist. You don't have to be skilled in the area. You could be shaking in your boots. I am unable to tell anybody. Can I have one of those real quick? To tell anybody about Jesus. But I will. And what I'm challenging you to do is to take this piece of paper home. And on the back of it, I am challenging you to put 2 names on here. These are unchurched people that you know. Unchurched people that you know. And I'm asking you to take this and put it on your refrigerator with a magnet. Or put it somewhere on your nightstand, somewhere where you're going to see it. Maybe right on the mirror in your bathroom. And every time you see it, I want you to commit to praying for these people. Praying for an opportunity to invite them to your church. Pray for an opportunity that they will have a softened heart when you say, hey, where are you going on Easter Sunday? And I'm asking everybody to pray. I'm not asking you to do anything yet except pray. Write their names down here and put this where you can see it so that you'll pray for them. Because in about 3 weeks, you're going to come in with these same pieces of paper. Don't lose them. And we're going to go put them up on that cross over there. We're going to give them to the Lord and say, I've been praying for this person for a month. And now I'm going to go invite them to church. You got a month of prayer for God to give you the strength to walk up to somebody that you already know and say, where are you going to church on Easter? Why don't you come with me? I'll share the gospel with them. Are you willing to do what Joseph did and do what's hard? Let's pray.